Snatch your soul from me. Hello, you guys. Let me go ahead and organize a little bit here. Let me know if the audio is actually going to come through nice and clear when you guys enter into the chat. Let me know how the audio is operating for you all. Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Grand day of the sun. Grand day of the sun. Hello, everyone. Where have you been? Where have you been? Where have you been? Welcome back to Reality in Balance. So, we're just going to jump right back into part 2 of chapter 2, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, AAA by Pete Walker. So we're still making our way through these chapters, okay? Knowledge and information, each one, teach one. Let's go. When you enter into the chat, make sure you say hello, like, and sub up to the channel. Any additional information about me, check me out on realityandbalance.com, where I have a library resource of information from branching all from working with essential oils, believing in yourself, knowing yourself, powerful affirmations, words of power. I deal with a lot of ancestry knowledge and information from this plane, the physical, and from the spiritual plane as well. Okay. In addition to that, I have a Facebook group called Recharge and Support from Abuse on Facebook. Check us out over there. And in addition to all of that wonderful stuff, I have one self-help book available right now on Amazon titled Affirmations for a Survivor, Expressions of Individuality. Expressions of Individuality. So check me out over there also. You can actually look at the self-help book on my website as well. Thank y'all for being here. I really love, obviously intellect, okay? And I'm so grateful to discover this book written by Pete Walker. So the first chapter was the foundation of what CPTSD was and the operations therein, right? A lovely or so-called, we have to make everything upbeat. Okay. This information of umbrellas of what CPTSD is and what it branches out and what it means to you and your family. Just a little outline of what CPTSD is. It is a formulation that is created in your early childhood development. Okay, it's a formulation that was created in your early childhood development. I highly recommend that each and every individual go back and listen to chapter 1 and part 2 of chapter 1 right here on this channel, okay, to get you up to date. So, like over a week ago, we began chapter 2 titled Levels of Recovery. Okay, and what we got from it so far is that levels of recovery is just exactly that, levels of recovery. There's not a one fix stick for everyone. Everyone is not going to fit in a model, in a format in regards to these really complex issues and concerns develop in early childhood development. So It looks like he's going through some modalities, some other healing modalities that one may be mindful of that's taking place within you right now, or one that you may want to look into as form of interest to continue this path to thriving. All right. So we're in part two of levels of recovery. And I think what we want to do is begin with the sub chapter of mindfulness. Mindfulness. Okay, sipping my little tea. Hope you guys got your water, your pen, your paper, have like some white candle. Shamalan, shamalan, shamalan. But this is not as deep and complex as understanding the foundation of CPTSD, complex PTSD. These are the levels of thriving from CPTSD. So here we go, mindfulness. This is on page 28, by the way, for everybody who wants to follow along. So, mindfulness, psychologically speaking, mindfulness is taking undistracted time to become fully aware of your thoughts and feelings so that you can have more choice in how you respond to them. Do I really agree with this thought, or have I been pressured into believing it? How do I want to respond to this feeling? Distract myself from it? Repress it? Express it? Or just feel it until it changes into something else? Mindfulness is a perspective that weds your capacity for self observation with your instinct of self compassion. It is therefore your ability to observe yourself from an objective and self accepting viewpoint. It is a key function of a healthy, developed ego, and it's sometimes described as the observing ego or the witnessing self. Mindfulness is a perspective of benign curiosity about all of your inner experience. Recovery is enhanced immeasurably by developing this helpful process of introspection. As it becomes more developed, mindfulness can be used to reorganize and disidentify from beliefs and viewpoints that you acquire from your traumatizing family. I cannot overstate the importance of becoming aware of your inner self commentary. With enough practice, mindfulness eventually awakens your fighting spirit to resist the abusive reframes from your childhood and to replace them with thoughts that are self supportive. Mindfulness also helps you to establish a perspective from which you can assess and guide your own efforts of recovery. Chapter 12 contains detailed instruction for enhancing mindfulness, as do the writings of Stephen Levine, Jack Cornfield, and John Kabat-Zinn. Finally, it is important to note that mindfulness tends to develop and expand in a progressive manner to all levels of our experience: cognitive, emotional, physical, and relational. Mindfulness is essential for guiding us at every level of recovery, and we will examine this principle more closely throughout the book. So, just reiterating what the author is telling us, that it all starts in the mind. Our mind and the body will follow. Our body follows after our mind frame. It takes place in the crown, and the action and the movement takes place from your levels of how aware you are of your thoughts, and forms of maybe like some flashbacks or forms of some anxiety stemming from somewhere. How does one respond to these experiences that are within an individual? Being mindful of like this unique transformation that wants to take place but needs for you to be aware of this transformation. Okay, so next let's go to the subchapter titled Emotional Healing. Traumatizing parents do as much damage to our emotional natures as they do to our thinking processes. Consequently, there is a great deal of recovery work that needs to be done on this level. This is especially true because of the damage our wider society also does to our emotional natures. Subchapter Recovering the Emotional Nature. Recovering the Emotional Nature. This section is an updated version of an article I wrote in 1991. I originally wrote it as a prelude to my first book, The Tao of Fully Feeling, and it was written as an appeal to the general public to understand the consequences of trying to sanitize one's emotions. Thankfully, the response I received encouraged me to complete that book, which is a guide to overcoming the familial and societal damage meted out on children's emotional life. The survivor who is seeking a healthy relationship with his emotional being will strive to accept the existential fact that the human feeling nature is often contradictory and frequently facilitates between opposite polarities of feeling experiences. It is quite normal for feeling to change unpredictably along continuums that stretch between a variety of emotional polarities. As such, it is especially human and healthy to have shifts of mood between such extremes as happy and sad, enthused and depressed, loving and angry, trusting and suspicious, brave and afraid, and forgiving and blaming. Unfortunately, in this culture, only the positive polarity of any emotional experience is approved or allowed. This can cause such an avoidance of the negative polarity that at least two different painful conditions result. In the first, the person injures and exhausts himself in compulsive attempts to avoid a disavowed feeling and actually becomes more stuck in it. This is like the archetypical clown whose frantic efforts to free himself from a piece of flypaper leave him more immobilized and entangled. And the second, repression of one end of the emotional continuum often leads to a repression of the whole continuum, and the person becomes emotionally deadened. The baby of emotional vitality is thrown out with the bathwater of some unacceptable feeling. A reluctance to participate in such a fundamental realm of the human experience results in much unnecessary loss. For just as without night there is no day, without work there is no play, without hunger there is no satiation, without fear there is no courage, without tears there is no joy, and without anger there is no real love. Most people who choose or are coerced into only identifying with positive feelings usually wind up in an emotionally lifeless middle ground, bland, deadened, and disassociated in an unemotional no man's land. Moreover, when a person tries to hold on to a preferred feeling for longer than its actual tenure, she often appears as unnatural and phony as ersatz grass or plastic flowers. If instead she learns to surrender willingly to the normal human experience that good feelings always ebb and flow, she will eventually be graced with a growing ability to renew herself in the vital waters of emotional flexibility. The repression of the so called negative polarities of emotion causes much unnecessary pain as well as the loss of many essential aspects of the feeling nature. Many of the feeling nature. Highlight that, you guys. The feeling nature. Okay, let's put a pin into that because the feeling nature is a really broad level of spectrum. But like as the author is reiterating to us that only in this society that our positive feelings are accepted. Anything outside of joy, of and all of the levels of fakeness that comes with joy and happiness is accepted. Even if you're faking being joyful, even if you're faking being happy, that is still accepted in this society. Like cue up when people ask how you're doing, oh, yeah, 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 you know. So the person who's asking, how are you doing, is the person generally caring, asking, how are you doing, and how are you interpreting the feelings of how you are doing. In this society, they only accept gratitude when it comes to fake joy, fake happiness. But on the other spectrum of the emotional levels of feeling are the polarities of that most people are avoidant to the polarity of joy, happiness. So, nowhere not in the deepest recesses of the self or in the presence of his closest friends is the average person allowed to have and explore any number of normal emotional states. Anger, depression, envy, sadness, fear, distrust, etc., are all as normal a part of life as bread and flowers and streets. Yet they have become unambiguously avoided and shameful human experiences. How tragic this is, for all of these emotions have enormously important and healthy functions in a wholly integrated psyche. One dimension where there is most true is in the arena of healthy self protection. For without access to our uncomfortable or painful feelings, we are deprived of the most fundamental part of our ability to notice when something something is unfair, abusive, or neglectful in our environments. So we're on page 32 now. Those who cannot feel their sadness often do not know when they are being unfairly excluded, and those who cannot feel their normal angry or fearful responses to abuse are often in danger of putting up with it without protest. Perhaps never before has humankind been so alienated from so many of its normal feeling states as it is in the 21st century. Never before have so many human beings been so emotionally deadened and impoverished. The disease of emotional emaciation is epidemic. Its effects on health are often euphemistically labeled as stress. And like the emotions, stress is often treated like some unwanted waste that most that must be removed. Until all of the emotions are accepted indiscriminately, and acceptance does not imply license to dump emotions irresponsibly or abusively. There can be no wholeness, no real sense of well being, and no solid sense of self esteem. Thus, while it may be fairly easy to like yourself when feelings of love or happiness or serenity are present, deeper psychological health is seen only when you can maintain a posture of self love and self respect in the times of emotional hurt that accompanies life inevitable contingencies of loss, loneliness, confusion, uncontrolled unfairness, and accidental mistakes. The human feeling experience, much like the weather, is often unpredictably changeable. You see how they say, let's put a pin, the human feelings, the human feeling experience, the human, not man feeling experience, not women feeling experience, all the human feeling experience, much like the weather, is often unpredictably changeable. No positive feeling can be induced to persist as a permanent experience, no matter what cognitive behavior therapy tells us. As disappointing as this may be, as much as we might like to deny it, as much as it causes each of us ongoing life frustration, and as much as we were raised and continue to be reinforced for trying to control and pick our feelings, they are still, by definition, of the human condition, largely outside the province of our wills. So the author is going on to the next sub chapter, still on page 32, titled Emotional Intelligence. I know you guys are going to really like this part. This is a really, 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 I don't know. I'm excited to read a little bit more about emotional intelligence. What does the author, Pete Walker, has to say about emotional intelligence? Thank y'all for coming in and liking the stream and subbing up to the channel. Sub up, sub up, sub up, like. So the author is saying that Daniel Goleman, Goleman, defines emotional intelligence as our ability to successfully recognize and manage our own feelings and to healthily respond to the feelings of others. So not only for you, but for the outside world also. As implied above, I believe the quality of our emotional intelligence is reflected in the degree to which we accept all of our feelings without automatically disassociating from them or expressing them in a way that hurts ourselves or others. When we are emotionally intelligent, we also extend this acceptance to our intimates. One of my clients calls this the hallmark of relationships. Another way of saying this is that I have self esteem to the degree that I keep my heart open to myself in all my emotional states. And I have intimacy with my friend, and I offer this type of emotional acceptance to each other. Once again, this does not condone destructive expressions of anger, which are, of course, counterproductive to trust and intimacy. I really love how the author is not only talking about, emotional intelligence is not just for the person, for the individual, it's for your outside experience as well. And that's a lot what I talk about, the four spectrums of holistic health that I really talk about with my clients: the emotional, the physical, the mental. All right. Where the emotional is, how are you responding to outside stimuli, and how are you responding to the stimuli from within? So I really love that the author is really speaking to accepting other people's emotions, how they're feeling, this wide spectrum, right? But not the destructive spectrum of the emotions, but the spectrum of like changing weathers of our emotion, respecting the outside stimuli of someone else's feelings when they're sad, when they're down, when they're depressed, when they're angry, accepting where they are as you would want to accept yourself, and how you're feeling on your day to day are all sigils in awareness of emotional intelligence. Okay, so furthermore, in this subchapter, the author is saying that CPTSD engendering parents often are hypocritical, attacking their children's emotional expressions in a bimodal way. This occurs when the child is both abused or emoting and is at the same time abused by her caretaker's toxic emotional expression. Most traumatizing parents are especially contemptuous towards the child's expression of emotional pain. This contempt then forces the child's all important capacity for healthy grieving into developmental arrest. One archetypical example of this is seen in the parent who hurts his child to the point of tears and then has the nerve to say, "Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about." A client once told me that he often fantasized about giving his father this angry reply: "What are you talking about? You already gave me something to cry about." He did not, however, because he had long since learned that getting angry back was a capital crime that would elicit the most savage retaliation. Typically, it would be delivered with homicidal rage. "I'll knock you from here to kingdom come." Page 34. The above is, of course, a blatant example of the slaughtering of emotional expression, just as common in the insidious passive aggressive assault on emoting, which is seen in the parent who shuns her child for expressing his feelings. This is seen in the emotional abandoning parent who sequesters the child in a timeout for crying or routinely retreats from the crying child into her room. The worst, most damaging example of this occurs when this is done to the pre-verbal toddler or baby who only has emotions which with which to express herself. Pre-verbal children are by definition far too young to learn the 2 to 3 year old's developmental task of using her words to communicate about her feelings. Note that the author says pre-verbal children are by definition far too young to learn the 2 to 3 year old's developmental task of using her words to communicate about her feelings, right? Because even toddlers, most of them are just all full of feelings. That's why they got so much energy, right? They are full of feelings. Babies full of feelings. They're operating off of feeling how they feel about their environment, how they're feeling inside, right? Moving on, the author is saying that an especially nasty form of emotional abuse occurs in the traumatizing family when the child is even attacked for displays of pleasant emotion. As I write this, I flash back to scenes of my mother sneering at my little sister and snarling, "What are you so happy about?" And my father's frequent, "What are you laughing at? Wipe that smile off of your face." Emotional abuse is also almost always accompanied by emotional abandonment, which can most simply be described as a relentless lack of parental warmth and love. Sometimes this is most poignantly described as not being liked by your parents, which belies the many CPTSD inducing parents who say they love their children but demonstrate in 1,000 ways that they do not like them. The sight of you make me sick was very popular with such parents when I was growing up. It can still bring tears to my eyes to remember my emotionally abandoned young sister secreted in a corner of the house begging our family dog, "Like me, Gender, like me." Woo, that was kind of heavy lifting work, right? Emotional intelligence. So, obviously, most of us didn't recognize this form of emotional abuse. This is why he gave us these really foundational points of what that looks like from, an engendering CPTSD parent, a trait that's passed on generationally, right? Either they're mad and hate you because you're happy, they're mad and they hate you basically because you're sad, and everything in between. But the one key that is missing is that liminal space in the middle is accepting the child for who they are and their emotions and how they express, accepting their feelings. So we're on page 35 of Pete Walker's book, Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving. And the next subchapter is titled Toxic Shame and Soul Murder. Soul murder, SOUL. Toxic shame. Toxic shame is a big one. Let's get into it. The rejecting responses of our parents to our emotional expression alienate us from our feelings. Emotional abuse neglect scares us out of our own emotions while simultaneously making us terrified of other people's feelings. John Bradshaw describes the devastation of the child's emotional nature as soul murder. He explains this as involving a process where the child's emotional expression, his first language of self expression, is so assaulted with disgust that any emotional experience immediately devolves into toxic shame. I believe that toxic shame is the effect of the inner critic, and that inner critic thought processes are the cognitions. Okay. I believe that toxic shame is the effect of the inner critic, and that inner critic thought processes are the cognitions of shame. A terrible yin and yang process emanating my bad, from our original abandonment, emanating a terrible yin and yang process emanating from our original abandonment because of the deadly 1-2 punch of familial and societal attacks on our emotional selves. We need to recover our innate emotional intelligence. This is also deeply important because, as Carl Jung emphasized, our emotions tell us what is really important to us. When our emotional intelligence is restricted, we often do not know what we really want and can consequently struggle mightily with even the smallest decisions. As emotional recovery progresses, the mindfulness described above begins to extend towards our emotional experience. This helps us to stop automatically disassociating from our feelings. We then learn to identify our feelings and choose healthy ways to respond to them and from them. Such emotional development illuminates our own natural preferences and, in turn, aids us in making easier and better choices. Towards the end of a long term therapy, a male client told me, "Yesterday I was so contemplating what I have discovered in the years of our work together, and I am amazed at how much my values have shifted away from those of the macho family and culture I grew up in. I feel now like I prefer the arts to science, novels to nonfiction, gardening to watching golf, and hanging out with my partner as a home to partying at bars." Okay. The next subchapter on page 36 is called Grieving as Emotional Intelligence. Grieving is the key process for reconnecting with our repressed emotional intelligence. Grieving reconnects us with our full complement of feelings. Grieving is necessary to help us release and work through our pain about the terrible losses of our childhoods. These losses are like deaths of part of ourselves. Excuse me, and grieving can often initiate their rebirth. Next subtext chapter, grieving and verbal ventilation. Grieving restores our crucial developmentally arrested capacity to verbally ventilate. Verbal ventilation is the penultimate grieving practice. It is speaking from your feelings in a way that releases and revolves your emotional distress. I believe the following description of a six-panel cartoon visually conveys the powerful, transformative power of verbal ventilation. In the first panel of the wordless cartoon, a woman with a dark cloud over her head is talking to a friend who has a shiny sun over hers. In panel two, as the first woman gestures in a way that indicates complaining, the cloud covers her friend's sun. In the panel three, the cloud emits a bolt of lightning as she angrily purges, and her friend glowers along with her. In panel four, the cloud rains on them as they embrace commissariating, commissary, I think I said that right, in the rain of their shared tears. In panel five, relief spreads over their faces as the cloud moves away from the sun. In panel six, the sun shines over both of them as they smile and slip into pleasant conversation. This cartoon reflects the fully realized power of verbal ventilation, which is the key bonding process in intimacy. It is also the key healing processes of effective therapy. And here it is an example of what verbally ventilating looks like in a therapy session. A client arrives flashbacked and in pain. He verbally ventilates about it. He is the regressed, hurt child feeling bad, and part of him is sad and part of him is mad. He is once again lost in the painful feeling of his original abandonment, and this state is like a death that responds well to grieving. As he lets his feelings come into his voice, he talks, he cries, and angers out of his pain. Through this processing of his pain, he then gradually moves out of his flashback. He is restored to his normal, everyday sense that he is no longer trapped in his traumatic childhood. Relief about this returns him to his normal ability to cope. If he wait, if his grieving is deep enough, he customarily feels more hopeful and lighthearted. Not infrequently, his sense of humor resurfaces and laughter punctuates his continual verbal ventilation. This laughter is usually much different than the sarcastic, self bullying humor of his critic that he might have begun the session with. The inner critic is sometimes so hostile to grieving that shrinking the critic may need to be your first recovery priority. Let's put a pin in that because the inner critic is super hostile. The inner critic is hostile. Let's move on. Until the critic is sufficiently tamed, grieving can actually make flashbacks worse rather than perform the restorative processes it alone can initiate. I have worked with numerous clients who were so traumatized around grieving that we needed to spend many months working on the cognitive level before grieving was released from the spoiling effects of the toxic critic. Chapter 11 provides a great deal of practical guidance for restoring your ability to grieve. Page 38, spiritual healing. Soothing abandonment losses via a higher sense of belonging. He wrote this in bold, another subtext underneath spiritual healing, which says again, soothing abandonment losses via a higher sense of belonging. Spiritual beliefs are, of course, a subject of personal and sometimes private concern. And I believe and hope what I write here is not um, proselytizing. pros wait, proselytizing, pros, I know what pros is, lie, lytizing, proselytizing. Well, I'm sure I butchered that, I apologize. My aim instead is to point out psychological concepts that have a non secretarian spiritual aspect. I am aware, however, that some survivors have suffered terrible spiritual abuse in childhood, and if the term spiritual is offensive or triggering in any way, please feel free to bypass this section. There are many other useful tools in this toolbox. A key aspect of the abandonment, depression, and CPTSD is the lack of a sense of belonging to humanity, life, anyone, or anything. I've met many survivors whose first glimmer of belonging came to them on a quest that began as a spiritual pursuit. Finding nothing but betrayal in the realm of humans, they turn to the spiritual for help. Spiritual pursuits are sometimes fueled by an unconscious hope of finding a sense of belonging. The worst thing that can happen to a child is to be unwelcome in his family or of origin, to never feel included. Moreover, many survivors have little or no experience of any social arena that feels safe and welcoming. Many survivors also do not find a sense of belonging in traditional or organized religions, finding conventional religion too reminiscent of their dysfunctional families. Some survivors look to more solitary spiritual approaches. They find a sense of belonging to something larger and more comforting by reading spiritual books or engaging in meditative practices. This also allows them to bypass the danger of direct human contact. Other survivors have spiritual experiences of belonging to something greater and worthwhile by being in nature, by listening to music, or by appreciating the arts. I once marveled at a book whose title now eludes me. That was a compendium. I don't know what kind of words they be using here. A compendium of quotes from many renowned people who had numinous experiences through the direct perception of nature's beauty. Ashe, 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 ashe. A numinous experience is a powerful, moving feeling of well being accompanied by a sense that there is a positive, benign force behind the universe, as well as within yourself. This in turn sometimes bring enough grace with it that you have a profound feeling that you are essentially worthwhile, that you belong in this life, and that life is a gift. One of my website respondents sent me her personal account of therapeutic gratitude. Her name is Mary Quinn of Ireland. In answer to my request to reprint her writings, she replied, "Yes, and in honor of my little one, and for all of the times her voice went unheard, you may use my name." I went to the beach a couple of days ago in the morning and sat watching the sun coming up. I had an incredible moment of the purest clarity. I was watching birds flying low over the water. The moon was still visible and the sun was rising. I realized I was looking at three planets and there was another person in sight. It was a moment of breathtaking beauty, and the tears slid down my face at how deep it is possible to feel. I have been numb for so long. I wrapped my arms around myself and felt the presence of the little one so strongly it was almost painful. But in a healing way, if that makes sense. I realized that the life experiences I have had to date brought me to that exact moment and gave me the depth to appreciate it at that level. A sense of peace wash through me like a gentle wave, and for a few moments I felt a connection to a feeling of everything being part of life. It was breathtakingly beautiful. I felt like I was experiencing this moment with all of my senses, and I never knew it was possible to be so much in my body. The gratitude feeling is deep and profound when it occurs. It feels like a moment of connection to life itself on the deepest level and all life circumstances. And what I deem as problems pale to the insignificance in those moments. And there is only love in its purest form. It truly feels like a blessing, albeit fleeting, but gives enough sustenance and hope to continue the journey. Whatever the source, spiritual or numinous occurrences sometimes provide the survivor with her first sense of belonging to something bigger and essentially good. Such experiences can lead a survivor to an author or speaker or fellow traveler with similar sensibilities. And sometimes a door opens for finding comfort with a fellow human. Eventually, this may even grow into a sense that there are some humans out there who are good and safe enough to engage with. Okay, so our next subchapter on page 40 is titled Gratitude and Good Enough Parenting. Recognize the author said good enough. So, gratitude and good enough parenting. When when developing children receive good enough parenting, they feel that life is a gift, even though it typically comes with difficult and painful experiences. The term good enough parenting derives from the work of renowned adult and child psychologist D.W. Wincott, Winnicott, who coined the term good enough mothering to describe his observation that children do not need parents to be perfect. He noticed through his long career that children grew up with their self esteem and capacity for intimacy intact when their parents were reasonably consistent with their love and support. Nowadays, many therapists attach the phrase good enough to concepts like friend, partner, therapist, or person. This is usually done to deconstruct perfectionistic expectations of relationships. Expectations that are so unrealistic that they are destructive to essentially worthwhile relationships. Ashe. When I apply the concept of good enough to people, I generally mean that a person is essentially good hearted, tries to be fair, and meets his or her commitments a large portion of the time. I also like to apply good enough to other concepts such as a good enough job, a good enough try, a good enough outing, a good enough day, or a good enough life. I apply this concept liberally to contradict the black and white all or nothing of the critic, which judges people and things as defective unless they are perfect. Good enough parents provide generous amounts of support, protection, and comforting. They also guide their children to deal destructively with reoccurring existential difficulties such as loss, real villains, painful world events, and normal disappointments with friends and family. Most importantly, they model how disappointments with intimates can be repaired. A key way they do this is to easily forgive their children for normal mistakes and shortcomings. Children who receive good enough parenting easily recognize and protect themselves from bullying and exploitative people because they do not have to become accustomed to being treated unfairly. Growing up in a safe and loving enough family naturally enhances the child's capacity to notice and enjoy the many gifts that life also brings. He learns that there is good enough in life to significantly outweigh its necessary losses and travails. In the traumatizing family, however, there is little or nothing that is good enough and hence little for which to be grateful for. The child instead is forced to overdevelop a critic that hyper focuses on what is dangerously imperfect in her as well as others. This sometimes helps her to hide aspects of herself that might be punished. It may further assist her to avoid people who might be punishing. Unfortunately, years of this habituate the child wait, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, years of this habituates the child into only seeing herself, life, and others in a negative life. Consequently, when she grows up and becomes free of her truly harmful family, she can now see that life offers her many new possibilities. Her ability to see the good in herself and certain safe enough others remains developmentally arrested. Her ability to see the good in herself and certain safe enough others remains developmentally arrested. The cultivation of gratitude requires a balanced perspective. You can learn to see and appreciate the good in life without giving up your ability to discern what is truly negative and unacceptable in the present. The next chapter, sub chapter, because we're still in chapter 2, on page 42, titled Somatic Healing. Somatic Healing. Trauma takes its toll on the body in many ways. We need to comprehend the physical damage that CPTSD wreaks on our bodies to motivate us to adopt practices that help us to heal on this level. Most of the physiological damage of extended trauma occurs because we are forced to spend so much time in hyperarousal, stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. When we are chronically stressed out, stuck in a sympathetic nervous system activation, detrimental somatic changes become ingrained in our bodies. This is so important because I was just talking to a relative about this yesterday, talking about, the sense of trauma down to the cellular level just sticks with the individual with due to different forms and fashion of an awareness of the presence of who they are and who they used to be. But nevertheless, he's saying when we are chronically stressed out, stuck in sympathetic nervous system activation, detrimental somatic changes become ingrained in our bodies. Here are some of the most common examples of body harming reactions to CPTSD stress: hypervigilance, shallow and incomplete breathing, constant adrenalization, armoring, example, chronic muscle tightness, wear and tear from rushing and armoring, inability to be fully present, relaxed, and grounded in our bodies, sleep problems from being over activated, digestive disorders from a tightened digestive tract, physiological damage from excessive self medication with alcohol, food, or drugs. Moreover, in cases of physical and sexual abuse, our capacities to be physically comforted by touch are eliminated or compromised. And in cases of verbal and emotional abuse, our capacities to be comforted by eye and voice contact are undeveloped or seriously diminished. This is so key. Oh my God, I'm so glad that I found this book. I'm going to, utilize some points in my own book that I'm writing another one. Okay. Woo! I love this chapter on somatic healing and the gratitude of the good enough parent. I really love that. Okay. I already have chapters on spiritual healing. Okay, let's get back. So the next subchapter on page 43 is titled Somatic Self Help. Thank y'all for coming in and liking the stream. We are just going to go and finish up this chapter, honey. We only got a few more things to talk about, okay? But we're going to finish up this chapter, baby. We're not going to let it linger. Okay, this chapter is titled Levels of Recovery. There is more than one way to look upon oneself in awareness. Okay, more than one way to look upon oneself in awareness in the form of surviving to thriving. All right, so the subchapter again is somatic self help. The good news is that some somatic repair happens automatically when we reduce our physiological stress by more efficient flashback management. Particularly potent help also comes from the grieving work of reclaiming the ability to cry self compassionately and to express anger self protectively. Ashe. Both processes can release armoring, promote embodiment, improve sleep, decrease hyperarousal, and encourage deeper and more rhythmic breathing. Ooh, child. I love it when we're talking about the physiological imbalances and balances that are going on with the. Whew. Anyway, without further expressingly somatic work, without further expressly somatic work. However, a full, relaxed inhabitancy of your body may not be achieved. Fortunately, there are other modes of self help for healing the physiological wounds of CPTSD. The somatic mindfulness and introspective somatic work. Sections of chapter 12 describe techniques that can help you to decrease adrenalization, to relax more deeply, and to improve your digestion. Moreover, step 7 of the flashback management steps at the beginning of chapter 8 contains 6 somatic self help techniques for relaxing out of the physiological hyperarousal of a flashback. Page 44. Uh-oh. That's the number I've been seeing for days. 44, page 44. Another especially helpful somatic practice is stretching. Yes, 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 yes. Regular systematic stretching of the body, major muscle groups can help you to reduce the armoring that occurs when your 4F responses is chronically triggered. This results from the fact that the 4F activation tightens and contracts your body in anticipation of the needs to fight back, flee, get small, to escape, notice, or rev up the launch into people pleasing activity. Ooh, child, I love stretching. I have foam rollers. Yeah, I love it. It is such a gift. All right, so he's saying that learning to stretch was a major ordeal for me because of my extreme body armoring. As noted above, it was a task of self nurturing that I resented intensely, and it took me a long time to adopt stretching as a regular practice. The fact that I had to weather many toxic shame attacks because I was always the least flexible person in the group did not help matters. Moreover, when various people commented about how good it felt to stretch, I felt both puzzled and further shame because it was anything but pleasant for me. Thankfully, however, reading the literature about it convinced me about its great importance and persistent practice eventually gave me results that I could not discount. I was rewarded by the resolution of decades old back problems. And although I still rarely enjoy the practice, I am absolutely convinced that it explains why I am still able to run, swim, and play basketball in my mid 60s. Stretching has become for me a true labor of love and self nurturance. Woo, yes, 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 yes. Yoga, massage, meditation, and relaxation training are formalized disciplines to aid in letting go of unnecessary body tension. Reasonably priced classes, he said, reasonably, reasonably priced classes in these modalities are usually available in most communities. Finally, freeze types and freeze subtypes also typically benefit from various types of movement therapy and um, different forms of exercises regimes, aerobic exercise regimes. I don't know why it took a while for that word to come. He says, finally, freeze types and freeze subtypes also typically benefit from various types of movement therapy and aerobic exercises regimes. Moreover, assertiveness training and anger release work are especially helpful for survivors who have difficulty accessing their assertiveness or instincts of self-protection. Page 45, subtext CPTSD and somatic therapy. Okay, we're almost done. We're almost done. We are getting to the levels of recovery. The levels of recovery. Not one, not two, not three, but levels of recovery, right? No stage, not a parallel direction. You know what I'm saying? Do this first, do this second, do this third, do this last. No, different levels of what fits and works for you. So the author is talking about CPTSD and somatic therapy. There are also various somatic therapies that can help our bodies heal. As with my earlier comments about CBT, I encourage you to be wary of somatic approaches that claim to heal CPTSD without working on the cognitive and emotional levels described above. Some approaches, in fact, blatantly dismiss cognitive work in a way that sidesteps the crucial work of shrinking the inner critic. Some approaches also believe that their techniques eliminate the fundamental necessity of grieving the losses of childhood and understanding how abusive and negligent parenting is at the root of our problems. Nothing the less, some somatic therapists can ease the physiological traumas that are locked in our bodies, as long as the practitioner is not actively dismissing or impeding the client's cognitive and emotional work. In this vein, it is my opinion that techniques like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and somatic experiencings are very powerful tools for stress reduction. They are especially helpful in resolving simple PTSD. However, there are not complete CPTSD therapies, unlike the practitioners, and eclectic enough to be incorporating inner critic and grieving the losses of childhood work. Other helpful somatic techniques includes Rosen work, Rolfing. Okay, these I've never heard of. Okay, so I'm sorry, I can't help you out here. I'll look into it. So the author is saying again, other helpful somatic techniques include Rosen work, Rosen work, Rolfing, Rolfing, rebirthing, and what? Rishian work, Rishian, Reichian work. These techniques can also be very helpful in aiding the recovery of the ability to therapeutically emote both tears and anger. So make sure if you guys are interested in other processes of therapy, then he's giving you some practical tools to maybe mention throughout sessions of counseling. He's saying that these techniques can also be very helpful in aiding the recovery of the ability to therapeutically emote both tears and anger. Page 46. For survivors of physical and or sexual abuse, I believe Rosen work is especially helpful. I found that Rosen works emphasizes on soft touch helped heal my CPTSD startle response to physical touch. A startle response is a sudden full body flinching that survivors experience at loud noises or unanticipated physical contact. This is usually a somatic flashback to previous abuses. In my case, the startle response was installed in me by my parents through frequent face slapping. As a lap swimmer in public pools, it has taken me ages to significantly reduce being triggered by the hand and arm movements of people who swim alongside me. I also had to shop around to find a Rosen worker who welcomed my use of the verbal ventilation process. Some practitioners prefer to work in silence, and this limits or eliminates the therapeutic benefits to most survivors. It is also important to emphasize here that somatic therapies can be especially helpful in healing the anxiety reaction to touch and physical closeness that many survivors of physical or sexual abuse experience. Ex- Exceptions to this are the survivors that I have met who have experienced remediation of this symptom through the help of an especially kind and safe partner. Ashe. Beautiful. On page 46, subchapter, we only got one more page to go, y'all. This is so beautiful. This is such a gift. Subtext titled The Role of Medication. There we go. The role of medication. Let's see what the author is noting in regards to the role of medication. As a psychotherapist, I am not authorized to give pharmaceutical advice, but I have frequently noticed that survivors who need pharmaceutical help seem to benefit most from SSRI antidepressants. Taken at the right dosage, SSRIs do not usually blunt your effect in a way that makes grieving impossible. Moreover, if your critic does not budge with extended critic shrinking work, SSRIs can usually reduce its volume and vitriol enough so that you can effectively shrink it. Once it is diminished enough, you can dispense with medications. Ashe, you see that? Let's read that again. He said, once it is diminished enough, you can dispense with medication. One caveat here is that unless you do extensive critic shrinking work, the critic will be as strong as ever when the medication wears off. Page 47, sub chapter title Self Medication. For those who have been repeatedly unsuccessful at stopping or reducing the use of non therapeutic medications and substances, Gabar, Gabor, Mats or Mats, Mate, work on harmful reduction. Okay, I've heard of harmful reduction. May be helpful. I've heard about it and I read about it. Drug and alcohol recovery, that's exactly what harmful reduction is. Drug and alcohol recovery is beyond the scope of this book. But if you are stuck in habits of self medication that are not allowing you to progress in your CPTSD recovery, I encourage you to get help from a substance abuse recovery program or from 12 steps program like Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous. And that's exactly where I read about in one of my courses about harmful reduction. So it works for some people. Obviously, it wouldn't be there. Forms of, programs of substance abuse and, the 12-step programs, it really actually does help for some people. So we don't judge unless like be judged. Woo, child. And here's the last piece of subtext in this chapter: levels of recovery. This is so unique because this is what I generally just be talking to about with my clients and with my family. All right. So this is titled Working with Food Issues. Let us explore one last arena of physical healing, and that is dietary self help. I agree with John Bradshaw, who says that almost everyone who grows up in a dysfunctional family has an eating disorder. This is a key factor in the digestive tract problem that are common symptoms of CPTSD. Chronic changing your eating habits is extremely difficult. A client left this quote on my waiting room bulletin board: alcohol and other drug recovery is like dealing with a tiger in a cage. Recovery from eating disorder is like taking that trigger out of the cage 3 times a day and then taking it for a walk. Yeah, that is true for sure. Okay, let's move on. He's saying that deconstructing food addictions then is daunting work that needs to be approached gradually and with a sense of compassion. This is because children who are traumatically abandoned naturally turn to food for comfort. Food offers us our first outside source of self soothing, and when a child is starving for love, he frequently makes food his love object. Over the years, he commonly elevates it to the status of a drug. Moreover, increasingly scientific evidence is showing that processed food products combining high levels of sugar, salt, fat are especially addictive. Food addictions begin pre verbally. They are functional and useful at the same time and help us to survive the unbearable feelings of the abandonment melange. Unfortunately, we are typically forced to rely on food soothing for so long that this over dependence is extremely difficult to overcome. And I do not recommend that anyone in early recovery make this their primary focus unless they have a life threatening food issue. Instead, I prefer to recommend MATE, MATE, harm reduction approach. Additionally, Janine Roth's book, Breaking Free from Compulsive Eating, also offers a moderate and sensible approach to dietary improvement. While many survivors can be unconscious of their damaging eating habits, I have met various survivors who take it to the opposite extreme. I once in the ranks of those who obsessively overfocus on dietary self-help, hoping and expecting that all their suffering will be resolved if they can just find the perfect diet. Many also chase after every new, highly touted supplement in this pursuit. Some of us also approach exercise in this manner. These are understandable but simplistic versions of the salvation fantasy and are typically pursued at the exclusion of working on more core issues of recovery. Nonetheless, almost everyone has some ideas about how they can eat and exercise and more healthily. My recommendations is to try dietary adjustments when you can on a moderate, doable level. And that completes chapter 2. I really love the organization of this chapter because I was able to relate, and many of you can too, to all the subtext chapters, right? Especially the last one. Um, I have to say for myself, like on this quote unquote path or journey of spirituality, food was the first was the first foundation. It wasn't any idea. I don't, maybe it was my idea, but you know, I was kind of like stuck in a crossfire, honestly. And spirit spoke a lot louder. You see, because I was already exercising and doing well, but I was still having this self critic, right? This really hateful self critic. Talked to my doctor about it. And they're like, well, we can put you on a small dose of antidepressants. And I thought back in my memory when my brother was on antidepressants and he almost wanted to kill himself even more. I was like, man, let me think about it. But when I truly was reflecting to myself in the kitchen, making a chicken salad, like something is just not right. Maybe I should today go ahead and email my doctor to get on, let's talk about some antidepressant. And then at that same time is when Dr. Sabi kicked in. This is before he even passed. Before Dr. Sabi transformed, wherever he is, you know what I'm saying? Because some people still think he's alive. Before Dr. Sabi transformed, his spirit spoke to me. And that's when the true work began. It's through the food that I ate. So I really love how the author touched on all of these points, right? From surviving to thriving in chapter 2 on the recovery process, the different levels of recovery. Maybe, you don't have to alter your diet. Maybe you don't have to alter your exercise, your physical sense. Maybe there's an emotional sense that needs to be balanced. Maybe, you know, it's some, he put emotional and mental almost in the same thing here, but maybe it's a mental sense of yourself that needs to be rebalanced, or maybe it's the whole full spectrum of the self, your mental, your emotional, your physical, and your spiritual. Those are the four aspects that I talk about with my clients in holistic health, the four spectrums of themselves. And obviously, other authors do as well. So it's not a one fit all from surviving to thriving, baby, because it all leads on to the acts of thriving. All leads to the acts of thriving. Gratitude for that. We have completed chapter 2, y'all. Chapter 3, we are going to get into it. We're going to get through the whole thing. We're going to get through the whole thing, right? I keep reiterating that this type of work is important, and it only is becoming more popular where people are speaking about it more openly now because of the things that are going on, on social media and on dealing with celebrities. People are feeling more comfortable about talking about different forms of abuse when, other people, traumatologists, psychologists, spiritualists, all these, people normal with no titles have been talking and dealing about this forever, for a long time, but I really do feel like it's becoming quote unquote popular because of the stance of what's going on with celebrities are speaking out now. People are feeling like, okay, I'm more comfortable to talk about my own experience, but not only that, to thrive from our experience. This is why we continue to come back, and this is why we continue to work in these areas. This is the foundational point of how so many people are experiencing life on many different ways, right? It's because the formalization of our early childhood development. Not only that, the stats have not changed in years. Even when I started this 15, 20 years ago, the stats have not changed. 1 in 3 girls will be sexually abused before they're 18, and 1 in 4 or 5 boys will be sexually abused before 18. This is not uncommon. This is work that will be done for us all to thrive together. So we're going to end on that note. Like I said, I have a Facebook group that's been going on strong for a long time. Recharge and support from abuse on Facebook. Be well, in balance, and peace. My name is Shawnee Janelle. Peace.